So our company, SFB Technologies, we signed a deal with a sovereign nation, with the Republic of the Marshall Islands, to help them be the appointed organizer to help them create a crypto legal tender for their country. Often people ask me, how do you close such a deal? So it started with research. I identified that in order to create a cryptocurrency that would be legitimately recognized as a real currency, only a country, a sovereign entity, can issue money. That's according to the American IRS and the FATF and other global such regulators. So I said, okay, if I need a country, what type of country do I need? And that's basically a process of like you're trying to understand your goal, and then you reverse engineer from that. So I said it needs to be a country. It doesn't need to be a big country, a large country. In fact, the smaller the country, the better our odds of closing such a deal in a reasonable time, because the smaller the organization, the less red tape and bureaucracy and layers of management you have. And so I basically had a Google spreadsheet of all the sovereign nations that are members of the UN. I think there's like 196 or 198, give or take. And then I said, let's look at the 10 smallest nations. And then I said, let's look at those that don't have their own currency. And then I said, they're using, let's say, the dollar or the Australian dollar. And then I said, let's look at democracies, because I only want to deal with a benevolent regime. I don't want to deal with like corrupted politicians and all that stuff. I want to be with like great people. And then lastly, I wanted them also to have a good relationship with the United States, because the United States is like today basically the biggest superpower, kind of calling the shots. And in order to have good success, you want to be aligned with US interests. So that kind of like left only a handful of nations on the list. And that really made me focused, because, for instance, one of our advisors, he said, you want to meet with the president of this European country? And I said, thank you, but it's out of our scope, because that country is not in my list. So that kind of like really allowed me to focus, because I could have said, yeah, let's meet him, it's just a meeting. But in order to prepare for such a meeting, I need to research that country, create presentations, all that, and then go to the meeting and then follow up. But if there's no long-term prospects, there's no point in meeting. So having the list and reverse engineering what I want to do really helped me. And that's how we got to the Marshall Islands, because from the countries that we had on the list, the handful of countries, we had a good connection to the Marshall Islands, so we decided to go there first. We actually had another country to meet in that visit, but we got to the Marshall Islands first, and the deal closed over there. So there was not really a point to go into long-drawn negotiations with the second country. Once you get to your, we got to the Marshall Islands, the question is how do you start the negotiation? How do you get to the partner? I think every negotiation is a process of building trust and appreciation from both sides. So once I got there, I was in no hurry to meet the president. I met with our first contact over there, is like one of the founding fathers of that country, but no longer an active politician. And we met with him. Through him, we learned more about the country, the culture, what pains them, and that kind of gave us context of how we can help that country. And we built trust with that person, because we saw how wonderful the Marshallese are. It's a very hospitable and close-knit and warm civilization over there. 50,000 people living in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And after this trust was established, that person introduced us to his son, because he wanted his son also to have some sort of, like, I assume, like a point of reference on us. And only then he introduced us to one of the ministers. Again, a process of building trust from both sides. And only then we were introduced to the president. And I think that was a very healthy process. And I repeated it after that in other negotiations. I prefer, sometimes people, they prefer to go to the head first, like the CEO or whatever. I understood that oftentimes the CEO let's say you have a meeting with the CEO. He would then, let's say, and he had an amazing impression of you and he wants to do a deal with you. But he's a very busy person, the CEO. So then he goes to his deputies in his management team and he asks them for their opinion, but those people haven't met you. Because they haven't met you, when people don't know you, they tend to assume the worst. So they might be like, and they don't know anything about you, so they might be like apprehensive. Especially if they see the CEO is very enthusiastic. Oftentimes deputies in management teams, they see their job as like cooling down the excitement of the CEO, because I know how I tend to sometimes get excited and how my people try to, calm me down. So what I prefer to do is actually first meet and nurture relationships and coalitions within the organization, the management team. Sometimes even the management, the report to the management and the report to the CEO. So then I cultivate the relationship, let's say with, for example, a senior, team leader in their technological organization. They're enthusiastic. They introduce us to the CTO. The CTO gets enthusiastic. The CTO then introduces us to the CEO. By that point, we've already established trust and enthusiasm and coalition within the organization. So when we're introduced to the CEO, all is left to the CEO is to say, yes, I agree. His deputies are already on board. So I think this is a very healthy process to do.